The burrito was cold. It had been cold. For 40 minutes, Dev Reyes had not noticed because he had been staring at a screen that should not have been showing what it was showing, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he understood that the world had just changed and he was the only person in the building awake enough to see it. The UN liaison office in Geneva did not look like the kind of place where history happened. It looked like a mid-range accounting firm that had run out of budget before reaching the break room. The coffee maker had been broken since March. The overhead light above Dev's desk flickered every 11 seconds with the reliability of a metronome and the charm of none. He was 31 years old, had a master's degree in xenolinguistics that he had never expected to use, and had taken this job because it paid better than teaching and required less eye contact. He pressed his palm flat against the desk. Solid, real, okay. The signal had arrived at 1:47 in the morning. It had not come through any channel that the liaison office monitored. It had not come through any channel that anyone on Earth monitored. Technically speaking, because the channel it came through had not existed. At 1:46 in the morning, it existed now. It had apparently decided to exist, specifically to deliver a document. The document was 47 pages long. The translation software at the top of the page provided with a politeness that felt almost insulting by the senders themselves, identified the originating body as the Galactic Council of Recognized Civilizations. It identified the recipient as the nation-state collective inhabiting the third orbital body of a mid-sequence yellow star, Sector 7 Gamma, locally designated Sol. It identified the document type as a formal notice of non-compliance and corrective intent. Dev read that line 3 times. Then he read the next line, which informed him that Earth had been assessed. He scrolled down. The assessment was thorough. It was in the way that truly devastating things sometimes are. Completely accurate. Every armed conflict in recorded human history was catalogued. Every environmental failure, every systemic inequality that had persisted across centuries, every moment humanity had looked at a problem it had created and chosen to create it again. Anyway, the council had done their homework. They had done it with the detached efficiency of a doctor reading a chart to a patient who already knew the diagnosis. At the bottom of page 43, the document arrived at its conclusion. Humanity had been found categorically non-compliant with civilizational tier standards. Humanity posed a potential long-term stability risk to the surrounding galactic region. Humanity was hereby given 48 Earth hours to begin the process of voluntary submission to corrective oversight, after which the Council would proceed with a corrective action as defined under Galactic Charter, Article 9, Subsection 4. Dev sat with that for a moment. He pulled up the internal messaging system. He needed to wake someone up. He needed to wake several someones up. He needed to find the chain of command and climb it fast, because 48 hours was not a lot of time, and he was a mid-level liaison officer eating a cold burrito at 2:00 in the morning, and this was approximately 4,000% above his pay grade. He started typing a message to his direct supervisor, Neil Holt, who was asleep in London. The door behind him opened. Chloe Ward walked in carrying a paper cup of tea. and wearing the expression of someone who had also not slept. She was 24, a junior at HFY, and she had a habit of showing up at odd hours because, as she had once explained to Dev without any embarrassment whatsoever, the office was quieter than her apartment and she thought better without her roommates. Podcast bleeding through the wall. She looked at his screen. She stopped walking. Is that, she said. Yes. Are they? Yes. She set her tea down on the edge of his desk very carefully. She read the top 3 lines of the document. She read them again. What do we do? She said. I'm writing to Neil. Neil's in London. I know where Neil is. Should we not also be calling someone else? Should we not be calling, I don't know, several hundred someone else's? Yes, I'm going to do that. I am writing to Neil first because that is the protocol, and I am trying very hard to follow a protocol right now because it is the only thing making me feel like a functioning human being. Chloe pulled a chair over and sat beside him. She read further down the document. Dev watched her face do the same thing. His face had done the careful stillness. That meant the brain was absorbing something too large for a normal expression to cover. She scrolled to page 43. She read the conclusion. 48 hours, she said. Yes. That's not very long. No. She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached across him and opened the communications interface, the formal response portal that the council's own software had apparently installed on their system alongside the document. Because of course it had, because the council had thought of everything and wanted to make the process of capitulation as frictionless as possible. I'm going to draft an acknowledgement, she said, just an acknowledgement. Nothing committal, just so they know we received it. That's reasonable. She started typing. She was fast. Dev went back to his message to Neil. The office hummed. The light flickered. Somewhere down the hall, the vending machine made a sound like a small animal shifting in its sleep. Dev finished the message to Neil and moved on to the escalation list. He was typing the third name when Chloe made a sound that was not quite a word. He looked up. She was staring at her screen with both hands pressed flat on the desk. Color had left her face in the specific way it leaves the face of someone who has just realized they made a mistake. That cannot be unmade. Chloe. I had a macro, she said. I set up macro last month for the automated response template, the one for routine document acknowledgements. It auto-fills and sends. I thought I was opening a new draft window. Dev looked at her screen. The communications portal showed a sent confirmation, timestamp 0209 AM, recipient Galactic Council of Recognized Civilizations, status delivered. The message field showed 2 words. Make us. Dev did not say anything for a long time. The light flickered once, twice, 11 seconds exactly. That's, he started. I know. That's what we sent. I know. To the Galactic Council. Dev. Who threatened us with a corrective action. I know what I did. He leaned back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling. The ceiling had a water stain in the shape of something he had never been able to identify. He looked at it now with the full attention of a man whose brain had run out of larger things to process. Then he looked back at the screen. Somewhere in the document, somewhere Those 47 precise and accurate pages, the council had listed every way that humanity was dangerous to itself, every internal failure, every wound that humans had opened and reopened across centuries of recorded history. He had read it and felt the weight of it, the accuracy of it. But now, sitting in a flickering office at 2:00 in the morning with cold food and a broken coffee maker and a sent message he could not retrieve, he realized something. They had listed what humans did to each other. The document was 47 pages long and detailed with apparent completeness. But there was not one line, not a paragraph, not a footnote, not a single entry in the appendix for what humans did when something from the outside came looking for a fight. Not one line. Chloe was still staring at her screen. "Should I send a correction?" she said. Dev picked up the burrito. It was still cold. He took a bite anyway. "No," he said. She turned to look at him. "Get me Neil's number," he said. "Then start calling the list, everyone on it. Tell them we have 48 hours and we already sent our opening position." "Our opening position," she repeated. "That's what I said." She looked at the sent message one more time, 2 words on a white screen. "Most significant diplomatic communication in the history of the human species produced by a wrong button. Press cold light and a macro set up by a junior at Hachette who just wanted to save time." Chloe Ward took a breath, then she picked up the phone. Dev's message to Neil went through at 2:14 in the morning. Neil Holt called back in 4 minutes, which meant Neil had not been sleeping either, which meant Neil had also seen something, a fragment, a signal bleed some edge of it, and had been lying in the dark waiting for confirmation that it was real. The call lasted 7 minutes. By the end of it, Neil had 3 other calls running simultaneously, and Dev had a direct line to a woman at the Foreign Office named Patricia Vass, who had a voice like someone who had been waiting her entire career for a phone call like this one and was not going to waste a single second of it. "Tell me everything," Patricia said. "Leave nothing out, including the 2 words." Dev told her everything. He left nothing out. He included the 2 words. There was a pause on the line. "Well," Patricia said. "Yes. That's either the worst thing anyone has ever done or the best. I've been going back and forth on that." "Stop going back and forth. Pick one and move forward." She was already typing. He could hear it, fast, precise keystrokes like someone who had made peace with urgency a long time ago. "I'm pulling in the Security Council. I need you to forward the full document to this address in the next 3 minutes. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good. And Dev?" "Yes." "Don't touch the communications portal again, not until we decide what comes next." He looked at Chloe, who was on her own phone now, working through the escalation list with a calm that he recognized as the particular calm of someone who had decided there was no longer any point in being anything other than calm. "Understood," he said. He forwarded the document. The clock on his screen read 2:21. 47 hours and 39 minutes left on the council's deadline. He reached for his coffee, remembered it was broken, drank Chloe's tea instead. It was also cold. He didn't notice. Iraq received confirmation of the reply at what his internal biological clock registered as the equivalent of early afternoon. A quiet, productive time by his species. Measure good for documentation and observation, and the sort of careful thinking that his 600 years had taught him to value over speed. He read the 2 words 4 times. He set the report down on his console. He picked it up again. He had processed 43 civilizational compliance cases in his career. He had seen bravado. He had seen defiance. He had seen the specific, sad performance of a species that knew it could not win but needed to feel as though it had tried. This did not read like any of those things. He flagged it for deeper analysis and sent a preliminary note to the council observer team. Then he sat for a long moment in the quiet of his monitoring station. 600 years of experience arranged around a 2-word message from a species that had been using radio signals for barely a century and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He did not have a name for it. He filed the report. He labeled the unnamed feeling as a variable. Then he opened a second file, private, unlabeled, separate from the official record, and began to write. 47 hours, not much time for a planet, a lot of time for a species that had spent most of its history doing the most with the least. The word spread fast, not the classified channels, those were moving too, but the word moved faster through the places where words always move fastest, between people who trust each other, in rooms where the lights are still on at 3:00 in the morning, across phone calls made between old friends who had not spoken in years but knew exactly why the other one was calling. By dawn in Geneva, it had reached 12 heads of state. By noon, it had reached the ones who wouldn't officially admit they'd been told. By mid-afternoon, in a server room in Bangalore that smelled like solder and yesterday's takeaway, a group of engineers who had been working on a satellite contract quietly closed that file and opened a new one. Nobody told them to, nobody asked. They just looked at each other across a table covered in empty cups and half-finished calculations, and one of them, a woman named Priya, who was 27, and had the specific kind of focus that made other engineers both admire and slightly fear her, said, "So different. Problem now." And they started working on the different problem. Dev Ray sat in his chair and watched the clock. He thought about the assessment. He thought about the 47 pages. He thought about the one thing that was not in them. He thought about Chloe's wrong button, about a macro designed to save 30 seconds becoming the loudest 2 words Earth had ever said. He thought about all the things humans did when something came at them from the outside. He thought about how none of that was in the document. He thought the council might want to read a different 47 pages. He was starting to think they were going to get the chance. Iraq's private log entry 1. The 2 words were not defiance. I have studied defiance. Defiance is the performance of strength you do not have. These 2 words had no performance in them. They were practical. They were almost administrative. I do not have a word for this. I have looked through 412 languages in the council archive, and I do not have word for a species that hears it is outmatched and responds by asking to see proof. I am adding a variable to my model. I do not yet know what to call it. I am going to keep watching. He closed the log. He looked at the 2 words one more time. Then he started writing a different kind of report. 46 hours and 51 minutes left on the clock. In a small office in Geneva, a junior attaché named Chloe Ward finished her call list, made herself a new cup of tea, and did not think about what she had done. She thought about what came next. It was, she decided, probably going to be interesting. She was right. The council's preliminary observation team met at the 72-hour mark, which was 24 hours after the deadline had passed, with no sign of voluntary compliance from Earth, and during which Earth had done nothing that registered as surrender, and a great many things that did not fit into any existing category in their observational database. Iraq sat at the end of the long, curved table and listened to his colleague discuss the situation with the measured confidence of people who had done this 43 times and expected this time to follow the same shape. He had filed his preliminary note. He had flagged the 2 words as anomalous. Nobody had asked him to elaborate. He was beginning to think elaboration was overdue. The team lead, a tall Viraki named Ask, pulled up the compliance timeline. And GT snorts. And GT 39 civilizations had submitted with it. The first 6 hours, 3 had attempted resistance, 1 had tried negotiation, and eventually submitted. None had replied with 2 words that translated roughly as a dare. They are disorganized, said another observer. Their communications in the hours following the notice were chaotic. Multiple conflicting signals, no unified response structure. This is consistent with a species in denial. Iraq looked at his private file. He thought about the engineers in Bangalore. He thought about the retired material scientist in Vermont who had walked back into a lab the morning after the broadcast. He thought about the 12-year-old in Sao Paulo whose name he did not yet know, but whose work he had been tracking for 18 hours. Not denial, he said. The table turned toward him. Then what? Ask asked. Iraq thought about how to explain it. He thought about all 412 languages in the archive. He thought about the word he had not been able to find. They are preparing, he said. The table was quiet. They are a civilization that has never unified against an external threat, said another observer. Their own historical record shows no precedent for global coordination. Their historical record, Iraq said carefully, shows no precedent because there has been no external threat. There is a difference. Ask looked at him for a long moment. Your recommendation? Iraq looked at the 2 words on his screen. He looked at the clock. Caution, he said. More data, more time. We have a charter obligation. 48 hours have elapsed. I know. We proceed to corrective action. Iraq nodded slowly. He filed his recommendation for caution. He noted that it was overruled. He updated his private log. They are going to send the ships, he wrote. I think the ships are going to learn something. I think I have been studying the wrong data. I think their history of internal conflict is not a weakness in the way we measured it. I think it is practice. I think we are about to find out what they practiced for. He closed the log. He began preparing for what came next. And for the first time in 600 years, the preparation felt like something other than routine. It felt like standing at the edge of something he could not see the bottom of. He looked down anyway. In Geneva at 7, 00 in the morning, Dev. Raj was still at his desk. He had slept. For 2 hours in his chair, his neck felt like a complaint letter from his spine. He had a new coffee, real coffee, brought by someone he had never met who had apparently walked into the building, located the liaison office, and deposited a full thermos on the front desk without explanation. He was not going to question it. He drank it and read through the latest compiled packet, 40 hours of work from hundreds of people across 14 time zones, most of them operating without formal instruction, without budget approval, without any of the organizational scaffolding that was supposed to make large things happen. They had just looked at the problem and started solving it because that was apparently the thing that humans did when the problem was large enough. He reached the last section of the packet, the Sao Paulo entry. A 12-year-old had taken the council's broadcast signal, the same signal that had delivered the 47-page document, and picked it apart. She had reverse-engineered partial architecture from the transmission encoding. She had posted her work forum at 11:00 on a school night with the title, "I think their signal works like this. Am I wrong?" And 73 engineers from 9 countries had responded within 4 hours. She was not wrong. Dev sat with that for a long time. Then he added her section to the front of the response packet above everything else, without annotation, without explanation, without a single word of context. It did not need any. He forwarded the packet to Patricia Vass. He leaned back in his chair. He looked at the water stain on the ceiling. 47 pages, he thought. They wrote 47 pages about us. They missed a lot. Outside, the city was waking up. Somewhere down the hall, Chloe was making tea. The coffee maker was still broken, and nobody had fixed it, and the lights still flickered every 11 seconds, and the world was in the most extraordinary moment in its history, and the break room still smelled like old carpet. Some things Dev thought were consistent. He was still thinking about the 12-year-old in Sao Paulo when his phone rang. It was Patricia. "The ships are moving," she said. He closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. "How long?" he said. 14 hours. He opened his eyes. "Is everything in place?" "Everything that can be," she said. "You know what this is, Dev. You know what we're walking into." "I know." And he looked at the sent message on his screen. 2 words, "Cold office, wrong. But the most human possible beginning to the most significant moment in human history. And we sent our opening position 14 hours ago," he said. "Seems rude to walk it back now." Patricia was quiet for a beat. Then, "Get some sleep. 2 hours, that's an order." She hung up. Dev looked at the ceiling one more time. He thought about the corrective action. Ships crossing the distance between there and here. He thought about 3 vessels that had ended 26 previous situations before they began. He thought about the council's 47 pages and the one thing they had left out. He thought about 14 hours. He thought about all the things that humans had managed to do in less time than that throughout the whole long, strange, embarrassing, brilliant history of being human. He closed his eyes. He was asleep in 4 minutes. In her apartment in Sao Paulo, 12-year-old named Lucia sat at her desk and refreshed the forum thread for the 89th time. The comments were still coming. Engineers, researchers, people whose job. Titles she didn't fully understand yet. All of them working from the framework she had sketched out on a Tuesday night, because she hadn't been able to sleep. And the signal had been interesting. Her phone had 47 new notifications. She had stopped reading them after the first 10 because they were making her feel a feeling she did not have a word for yet. She opened a new document instead. She had another idea. She started writing. The 3 council vessels crossed into the inner solar system at 600 Geneva time. They did not announce themselves. They did not need to. Their presence was its own announcement. 3 ships of a scale that had no equivalent in Earth's construction. History moving with the unhurried certainty of things that had never had reason to hurry. Iraq stood at the observation window of the lead vessel and watched the small blue planet grow larger. His colleagues were at their stations. The tactical team was running projections. The compliance protocol was loaded and ready. Everything was proceeding according to a procedure that had been used 43 times and had never required significant adaptation. Iraq was not thinking about the procedure. He was thinking about 112 signals. The first readings had come in 30 minutes ago. Not a fleet, not a unified defense formation, not anything that matched the tactical models they had prepared for. What the sensors were finding was an enormous distributed scatter of signals, transmissions, devices, and activity spread across an area far wider than any defending force would logically cover, as though humanity had looked at the concept of a defensive perimeter and decided to disagree with it on a fundamental level. Disorganized, said the tactical lead. No command structure. No coordination. Pattern. Iraq said nothing. He looked at the readings. He looked at the scatter. He thought about what 112 independent signals, each apparently doing something different, added up to when you stopped trying to read them as a military formation and started reading them as something else. As a conversation, maybe. A very loud, very human conversation, conducted simultaneously by people who had never met and would never need to, each of whom had looked at a problem and started working from whatever angle they could reach. The tactical lead began calling out. Approach vectors, standard procedure. The ships moved. The signals moved with them. Not defensively, not reactively. They shifted in a way that had no tactical logic Iraq could find in the archive, and he had been looking, and he had been looking hard because whatever this was, he wanted to name it before it happened. He could not name it. Contact in 4 minutes, said the tactical lead. Iraq pressed his hand flat against the observation window. The planet was close enough now that he could see the shape of continents. He had reviewed the geography. He knew where the deserts were, where the oceans were, where the large population centers sat in their ancient arrangements. He thought about the break room in Geneva that still had a broken coffee maker. He thought about a 12-year-old in a public forum and 73 engineers responding in 4 hours. He thought about 2 words sent by accident that nobody had retracted. 3 minutes, said the tactical lead. The signals were doing something now. And GT snorts. And GT. The scatter had not resolved into a formation. It had done something. Stranger than that, it had achieved a kind of coherence that was not organizational, not hierarchical, not designed in any way the models recognized. It was coherence the way weather is coherent, not because someone commanded it but because 1,000 independent pressures had aligned. The tactical model flagged it as noise. Iraq flagged it as something else. 2 minutes. He opened his private log. He wrote, "Vast. They are not defending. They are not surrendering. They are doing something I cannot categorize, and I have been trying for 30 minutes, and I want the record to show that I tried. I want the record to show that I flagged it. I want the record to show that when I said caution, I meant it. I think they have been preparing for this their entire history without knowing they were preparing for it. I think every internal conflict, every adaptation to scarcity, every improvised solution to an impossible problem was in aggregate practice. I think we are about to find out what a species looks like when it applies all of that to something from the outside. I think I should have pushed harder on the caution recommendation. I think we're going to be fine. I am not certain." He closed the log. 1 minute, said the tactical lead. The ships kept moving. The signals kept moving with them. And then, in the 60 seconds before contact, something happened that Iraq would spend the next 3 months trying to document accurately, because it happened too fast and too strangely for any single word in any of the 412 languages in the Council archive to fully contain it. The 112 signals, all of them different, all of them independent, all of them apparently having an argument with each other, converged not into a weapon, not into a shield, into a message addressed to the Council vessels, delivered simultaneously from every direction, encoded in the Council's own transmission architecture, the architecture that a 12-year-old had taken apart on a Tuesday night because she found it interesting and had not been able to sleep. Iraq read it before the tactical team did. 3 words this time. We were ready. He looked out the observation window at the small blue planet. He reached for his communication console. He sent one message back to the Council. 2 words, the most important thing he had written in 600 years of careful documentation. Stand down. Then he sat down in his chair, 600 years old and feeling every one of them, and began writing a new report, not the official one, the private one. He wrote for a long time. He was still writing when the ships turned around. Dev was asleep when it happened. Chloe was not. She was at her desk with a fresh cup of tea, monitoring the feed when the Council vessels changed course. When they stopped, when the signal from Iraq's ship reached the monitoring station and resolved into 2 words that she read 3 times because the first 2 times felt like something she had imagined. She sat very still. Then she picked up her phone and called Dev. He answered on the second ring, which meant he had not really been asleep, which she had suspected. "It's over," he said. His voice was the voice of someone who had been lying in the dark, running numbers. "They turned around," she said. He didn't say anything for a moment. "The signals worked." Another pause. She heard him breathe. "Lucia's encoding," he said. He had found the girl's name sometime in the night, the same way he had found everything else, by reading everything, leaving nothing out. "Yes," Chloe said. 12 years old, he said. Not a question. Just the fact of it sitting in the air. Between them. 12 years old, she confirmed. He was quiet for a long time, she let him be quiet. Outside her window, Geneva was fully awake now, going about the business of an ordinary morning, most of it entirely unaware that the most extraordinary 48 hours in human history had just concluded in a monitoring station on a council ship somewhere between here and the outer belt, with 2 words sent by a 600-year-old alien who had apparently changed his mind about something. What do we do now? Chloe said. We wait for the council's next move. Dev said they'll make one. This isn't finished. And in the meantime, she heard him sit up. She heard the old chair protest. She heard him pick something up, the thermos, probably the one left by the person no one had identified, and drink from it. Write a report, he said, full documentation, everything, the signal, the packet, the Sao Paulo work, all of it, every person who did something in the last 48 hours without being asked, every engineer who closed one file and opened a different one, every person who made a phone call they had not made in years. That's a lot of people. Yes. That's a long report. Yes, he said, make it longer than 47 pages. She almost laughed. It was close enough to a laugh that it counted. She started a new document. 6 weeks later, the council's revived communication arrived. It was formal. It was careful. It used the word colleague 17 times. It proposed a meeting, a framework, a mutual recognition process that acknowledged Earth as a they. Phrasing was specific, clearly labored over an emerging civilizational entity of significant and unanticipated complexity. Dev read it twice, then he printed it, walked down the hall and put it on Chloe's desk. She read it. She looked up at him. Significant and unanticipated complexity, she said. That's us, he said. She looked at the document. She looked at the communication portal, which was still open, had been open for 6 weeks. The reply field empty and patient. She thought about the 47 pages. She thought about the 48 hours. She thought about 112 signals and a Tuesday night, and a girl in Sao Paulo who had found an alien transmission interesting and had not been able to sleep. She typed 3 words. We'd love that. She pressed send. On purpose this time. In his monitoring station, Iraq received the reply and read it. 3 words, warm, direct, no performance in them, just a door held open. He had spent 6 weeks on his private report. It was longer than anything he had written in 600 years of documentation. It had a title. Finally, he had found the word, or at least the closest word, available in the archive, which was not perfect but was close enough. He had titled the section that dealt with the 2 words and the 48 hours and the 112 signals and the girl in Sao Paulo and the engineers who closed one file and opened a different one, and the retired scientist who walked back into a lab and the thermos of coffee left by a stranger in a Geneva office at 7:00 in the morning. He had titled it Spine as Civilizational Infrastructure. Then he had added a footnote. The footnote said, this word is insufficient. They will need to give us a better one. I suspect they will. He closed the report. He looked at the 3 words on his screen. He looked at the small blue planet. Distant now, getting smaller as the ship moved further away, back toward Council. Space, back toward the 600 years of careful documentation and measured distance that his life had been built from. He thought about the broken coffee maker, he thought about the wrong button, he thought about a 12-year-old who had looked at an alien signal and decided to take it apart because she found it interesting and had been right, and had not thought to be surprised by being right. He thought about a species that had been assessed in 47 pages and had spent 48 hours filling in the gaps. He thought about 3 words: warm, simple, a door held open. He wrote one final entry in the private log. They are going to be very loud, he wrote. They are going to be chaotic and contradictory, and they are going to do things that no model will predict. They are going to walk into rooms they were not invited into and ask questions that make the older civilizations uncomfortable. They are going to cause significant disruption to the established order of things. I am 600 years old. I have watched 43 civilizations receive this notice. I have never looked forward to anything. I am looking forward to this. I think it is going to be the most interesting thing I have ever documented. I think I am going to need more pages. He closed the log. Outside, the stars were very bright. He thought that was probably right. They had always been there. It just took the right kind of noise to make them feel close.